The impossible arrival Commander Voss had served aboard Sentinel Station Epsilon for 12 cycles, and in all that time, the double scan protocol had never failed. Not once. The station hung in the void like a watchful eye, one of 47 such installations forming an impenetrable web around the quarantined sector. Inside that invisible cage, humanity remained contained, a precautionary measure the Galactic Assembly had deemed necessary after Earth's discovery. Too aggressive, the reports had concluded. Too unpredictable. Too dangerous to be allowed free access to civilized space until they'd proven themselves capable of restraint. Voss didn't particularly agree with the policy, but he followed it. The barrier system was elegant in its simplicity, a network of quantum state sensors that detected any mass displacement larger than a micrometeorite. The first scan swept the sector every 8 minutes. The second scan, offset by 4 minutes, caught anything the first might have missed. Between the two, nothing larger than a cargo pod could slip through undetected. "First scan complete, Commander," announced sensor technician Raylan, her voice carrying the bored efficiency of routine. "Sector clear. No anomalies." Voss nodded absently, reviewing supply requisitions on his datapad. In 4 hours, his shift would end. He'd already decided on the Vicarian restaurant in the station's commercial ring. Their kelp noodles were exceptional. "Second scan initiating," Raylan continued. "Sweep pattern Alpha 7, full spectrum analysis, and wait." That single word dropped into the command center like a stone into still water. Voss looked up. "Wait." Raylan's chitinous fingers danced across her console, double and triple checking readings that shouldn't exist. "Commander, I have a contact. Bearing 273 Mark 15, distance 40,000 kilometers and closing. Impossible. The first scan was clean." "I'm aware, sir." Raylan's voice tightened. "Running diagnostics now. The contact it's a ship, Commander. Frigate class, and sir..." She paused, mandibles clicking in agitation. "It's broadcasting a human identification signature." The command center went silent. 6 other crew members stopped their tasks, staring at Raylan's display as if it might change through sheer force of will. Voss was already moving toward her station. "Show me." The holographic display materialized above the sensor console, and there it was. A vessel approximately 90 meters in length, sleek and angular, utterly foreign in design. The IF beacon pulsed steadily, transmitting in clear standard Galactic. "Terran Exploratory Vessel Meridian, Captain Sarah Chen commanding, request. Docking permissions and diplomatic courtesy. Run full diagnostics on the sensor array," Voss ordered, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his chest. "Verify the barrier integrity. And someone get me Representative Kale. Now." The next 7 minutes passed in organized chaos. Every diagnostic returned the same impossible result. The sensors were functioning perfectly. The barrier showed no signs of breach or malfunction, and yet a human ship sat in space where no human ship could possibly be. "Barrier integrity at 100%, reported Engineering Chief Torvax, confusion evident in his gravelly voice. "No fluctuations, no power spikes, no transit events recorded in the past 48 hours. Commander, according to every system we have, nothing crossed that barrier. And yet," Voss gestured at the hologram, where the Meridian continued its steady approach. Representative Kale arrived on the command deck, her silver robes flowing behind her like liquid metal. As the Assembly's appointed observer for this sector, she held authority even Voss couldn't override. "Explain," she demanded. Voss did in clipped, precise sentences. With each word, Kale's expression grew more severe. "Hail them," she ordered. "Demand they power down immediately and submit to boarding." Raylan opened the channel. "Unidentified vessel, this is Sentinel Station Epsilon. You have violated Galactic Assembly Quarantine Protocol 77 Alpha. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with lethal force." The response came immediately, the voice warm and utterly unflustered. "Sentinel Station Epsilon, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Meridian. We are fully aware of Protocol 77 Alpha and mean no hostile intent. We are prepared to cooperate with boarding procedures. However, I should mention that we're expected. You should have received notification of our arrival approximately 6 hours ago." Voss and Kale exchanged glances. "We received no such notification," Kale replied, taking over the communication herself. "Then someone dropped the ball on your end. Representative Kale, The human captain's use of Kale's name and title sent a chill through the command center. We filed proper diplomatic approach requests through the standard channels. But if there's been an administrative error, we're happy to wait while you sort it out. We've been patient this long. A few more hours won't hurt. Tractor them in, Kale ordered, cutting the channel. Isolation Bay 7. Full quarantine protocols. And I want a security team of 30 minimum. Representative, if they have weapons, then we respond accordingly, but we need to know how they breached the barrier. Kale's eyes fixed on the hologram, and we need to know what else we've missed. The tractor beam locked onto the Meridian with practiced efficiency, drawing it toward the station's most isolated docking facility. Voss watched the human ship come in, noting how it made no effort to evade or resist. Its engines remained at minimal power. Its weapon ports, and he counted at least 8, remained cold. That cooperative compliance worried him more than aggression would have. Isolation Bay 7 was designed for hostile quarantines. 3 layers of reinforced bulkheads, independent life support, remote venting capability, and enough firepower built into the walls to reduce anything inside to constituent atoms. As the Meridian settled onto the docking cradle, Voss watched through the observation port, 30 armed security personnel forming a perimeter around the airlock. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the Meridian's boarding ramp extended with hydraulic precision, and a single figure descended. Captain Sarah Chen was smaller than Voss had expected. Human standards put her at perhaps 1.7 meters, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and the kind of calm, measured movements that spoke of either extensive military training or extraordinary self-control. She wore a simple dark blue uniform with minimal ornamentation, and she carried nothing in her hands. She stopped at the bottom of the ramp, surveyed the ring of weapons pointed at her, and smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a placating smile, a smile of genuine, serene confidence. "Good evening," she said pleasantly. "I apologize for the apparent confusion. Captain Sarah Chen, Terran Exploratory Service. I believe Representative Kale is expecting me." She produced a data chip from her pocket, slowly, carefully, and held it out. "My credentials and diplomatic papers, all properly filed and authenticated." The security chief, a massive Korthian named Brex, approached cautiously and took the chip. He inserted it into his scanner and his eyes widened. "Representative, these appear legitimate. They're coded with assembly encryption, current encryption." "That's impossible," Kale said from her position behind the security line. "Humanity doesn't have access to assembly encryption protocols." Chen's smile never wavered. "Didn't, past tense. We've learned quite a bit in 17 years, Representative Kale. Your people are thorough, I'll give you that. But thorough isn't the same as perfect." She clasped her hands behind her back, somehow making the gesture seem relaxed, despite the arsenal aimed at her. "Now shall we discuss this like civilized beings? I've come a very long way, and I'm told the Assembly takes diplomatic protocol seriously. I'd hate to think that reputation was exaggerated." Voss felt his secondary heart skip a beat. She wasn't asking. She was stating a fact, confident it would be accepted. "Restrain her," Kyle ordered. "Carefully. And prepare an interrogation room. Commander Voss, I want every byte of data from that ship analyzed. Find out how they did this." As security personnel moved to comply, Chen met Voss's eyes through the observation port. Her expression didn't change, but something in her gaze made him certain of one terrible fact. She had expected exactly this response. She had planned for it. And whatever came next, humanity had already moved to Phase 2. The negotiation. The interrogation room was deliberately austere. Bare metal walls, a single table, 3 chairs, and lighting calibrated to be just uncomfortable enough to encourage cooperation. Chen sat in one chair with the same relaxed posture she'd maintained since arriving, hands folded on the table, expression serene. Voss and Kale occupied the other 2 chairs. Between them sat a recording device and a security override panel. Beyond the one-way mirror, 4 armed guards stood ready. "Let's begin with the obvious question," Kale said, her tone sharp as fractured glass. "How did you breach the barrier?" "I didn't," Chen replied simply. "I passed through it. The barrier is impenetrable." "Clearly not," Chen gestured to herself. "Evidence suggests otherwise." Voss leaned forward. "Captain Chen, we've maintained that quarantine for 17 years. The sensor network is triple redundant, quantum encrypted, and monitored continuously by artificial intelligence systems designed by the Veteran, the most advanced computational species in the assembly. You're telling us you simply passed through? I'm telling you that 17 years is a long time, Commander Voss. Chen's eyes moved between them, measuring, calculating. Long enough to study, long enough to learn, long enough to understand that what you call impenetrable is actually just very, very complicated. And complicated systems have patterns. Patterns can be analyzed. Analyzed patterns can be accommodated. You're claiming humanity reverse-engineered our containment technology? Kale's laugh was bitter. You barely had functional fusion drives when we found you. When you found us, Chen agreed. Emphasis on past tense. You put us in a box, Representative. Told us to stay there until we'd matured enough for galactic society. Then you walked away and assumed the box would hold. She tilted her head slightly. That was your first mistake. And what, Voss asked quietly, was our second? Thinking we'd waste 17 years being angry about it. Chen's smile returned, warm and deeply unsettling. We weren't angry, Commander. We were curious. You handed us the most sophisticated piece of technology we'd ever seen, and told us we couldn't cross it. Do you have any idea what that is to a species like ours? That's not a warning. That's a challenge. Kyle activated her datapad, scrolling through technical specifications. The barrier operates on principles your species shouldn't even theoretically understand. Quantum state sensors, subspace resonance detection, temporal flux monitoring. Temporal flux monitoring is actually the weak point, Chen interrupted casually. Took us 9 years to figure that out, another 6 to develop the harmonic dampeners, and the last 2 to test them extensively enough to be confident. The quantum sensors were easier. They're limited by the Heisenberg compensators in their detection arrays. Create a low-frequency oscillation at exactly the right amplitude, and you can slip through the gaps in their refresh cycle. The subspace resonance detectors are trickier, but once we understood that they're calibrated for standard fusion signatures, we just didn't use standard fusion. She paused. The Meridian runs on a hybrid antimatter zero-point system. Technically experimental, but it works beautifully. The silence that followed was profound. Voss felt something cold settle in his chest. You're telling us you studied the barrier for 17 years and developed entirely new propulsion systems just to circumvent it? Among other things. Chen reached into her uniform pocket, slowly, always visible, and produced a small device. She placed it on the table. May I? Kale nodded tensely. Chen activated the device. A holographic display materialized above the table showing Sentinel Station Epsilon, complete schematics, power distribution networks, sensor placement, patrol routes, shift rotations, everything. This is Station Epsilon, Chen said conversationally. Current as of 4 hours ago. Guard change happens every 8 hours, staggered across sections to maintain coverage. Your primary sensor array has a blind spot approximately 3.7 kilometers to spinward, created by the gravitational interference from the nearby moon. It's minimal, but it's there. Your backup power systems have a 47-second lag during switchover. Not enough to matter under normal circumstances, but in a crisis it's exploitable. She swiped the display, and it changed to show Station Delta, then Station Gamma, then a dozen more, each with the same terrifying level of detail. You've been watching us, Kale whispered. Since year 2, Chen confirmed. Passive observation only, we're not monsters. But we needed to understand what we were dealing with, and while we were watching we learned something interesting. She leaned forward slightly. Your barrier isn't designed to keep us in. It's designed to monitor us. The quarantine is psychological as much as physical. You wanted to know if we'd accept confinement, if we'd petition for release, if we'd rage against it or meekly comply. And you did neither, Voss said, understanding dawning. We did neither, Chen agreed. We went silent. We studied. We prepared. And then, when we were ready, we decided it was time for a conversation. A real one. Between equals. Kale stood abruptly, chair scraping against metal. You are not our equals. You violated assembly law. We violated a law we never agreed to, Chen said. Her voice still calm but now edged with steel. Earth was never consulted about the quarantine. We never signed your treaties. We never accepted your authority. You discovered us, decided we were dangerous, and locked us away without so much as asking our opinion. That's not law, Representative. That's imprisonment. It was for the safety of... Don't. Chen stood now as well, matching Kale's intensity. Don't insult both of us by claiming this was for our protection. You were afraid of us. Maybe you had reason to be. Our history isn't pretty, but you don't get to make decisions about our future without us and then act surprised when we refuse to accept them. Voss remained seated, watching the two women face off across the table. What do you want, Captain? Chen turned to him and her expression softened slightly. What we've always wanted, Commander. A seat at the table. A voice in the decisions that affect us. The same rights and responsibilities as every other species in the assembly. She gestured to the holographic schematic still floating above the table. We're showing you this not as a threat but as proof. Proof that we're capable. Proof that we're ready. Proof that your barrier didn't contain us, it just delayed us. And if the assembly refuses? Kale demanded. Chen's smile returned, but this time there was something sad in it. Then you'll spend the next several years discovering just how many humans are already out here, beyond your sensors, learning everything we can about you while you scramble to find us. We don't want that, Representative. It's inefficient, it builds resentment, and it wastes time we could both be spending on more productive things. But make no mistake, we're not going back in the box. She tapped her device again. The holographic display shifted, showing 4 new signatures. 4 ships, each broadcasting human identification codes, each sitting in supposedly secure sectors throughout assembly space. The Meridian wasn't the first ship through, Chen said quietly. It's just the first one we let you see. The others are still out there watching, learning, waiting. This is your choice, both of you. Recommend to the Assembly that humanity be granted provisional membership and begin formal diplomatic negotiations, or continue pretending you have control while we ghost through your borders like we were never contained at all. Kale stared at the holographic ships, and Voss watched the calculation happen behind her eyes. The representative was many things, but she wasn't stupid. She understood leverage when she saw it. This is extortion, Kale said flatly. This is negotiation, Chen corrected. Extortion would be threatening harm. We're not threatening anything except our continued presence. You can work with us or work around us, but you can't work without us anymore. That era ended the moment we figured out your barrier. Voss cleared his throat. You said this took 17 years of study. All of this, the technology, the intelligence gathering, the strategic planning, that's an enormous investment of resources for a species that was, by your own admission, barely spacefaring when we found you. It is, Chen agreed, settling back into her chair. Do you know what that tells you about humanity, Commander? So that you're patient, that we're committed. Chen's expression grew serious. Every species has its strengths. The Vethran have their computational brilliance. The Korthians have their physical might. The Vicarians have their diplomatic acumen. Humanity's strength is that when you tell us something can't be done, we take it as a hypothesis to be tested. You gave us a problem that should have been impossible, and we dedicated nearly 2 decades of our species' brightest minds to solving it. Not because we wanted to prove you wrong, though that was satisfying, but because we needed to know if it could be done. She stood again, this time moving to the room's single window. The Meridian was visible in the docking bay below, surrounded by security but utterly serene in its stillness. I should tell you something else, Chen said, her back to them. The Assembly isn't the only one watching this conversation. Right now, 17 human ships are monitoring our communications. Not in this sector, you'll never find them, but close enough. If I don't report back within 6 hours, they'll assume I've been detained indefinitely. Then they'll proceed with what we call the documentation protocol. Systematic recording and dissemination of everything we've learned about assembly space. Every weakness, every backdoor, every exploit. Not to use as weapons, but to ensure that if something happens to me, the knowledge survives. Insurance, Commander Voss, very boring, very thorough insurance. That's definitely extortion, Kale muttered. That's contingency planning. Chen turned back to face them. I'm not threatening you. I'm explaining the reality we've built. You can hate it, I wouldn't blame you, but you can't change it. The quarantine failed the moment we understood it. Now we're all living in a new reality, and the question is how we move forward. Voss stood slowly, moving to stand beside Chen at the window. Together they looked down at the human ship. This impossible thing that shouldn't exist in this space. You mentioned filing diplomatic papers, he said quietly. Before you arrived, you said they were properly authenticated with current assembly encryption. I did. How long have you had access to our encryption protocols? Chen glanced at him. and he saw genuine respect in her eyes. 5 years, 2 months, 18 days. We've never used it maliciously, only to observe and, in this case, to ensure our credentials would be verified as legitimate. We're not your enemies, Commander. We never wanted to be. We just wanted you to see us as we are, complicated, determined, and ready to join your community. On our terms, yes, but on terms that benefit everyone. Kale joined them at the window, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Finally, the representative took a long breath. I'll need to consult with the Assembly. This is beyond my authority to resolve. Of course, Chen said graciously. Take all the time you need. Well, she smiled slightly. All the time up to 6 hours. After that, the documentation protocol activates automatically. But I'm confident we can reach an understanding before then. You're very confident about a lot of things, Captain, Voss observed. Preparation breeds confidence, Commander. We've run thousands of simulations of this conversation. Every probable response, every likely objection, every possible outcome. She gestured at the room, at them, at the situation. This is actually one of our more optimistic scenarios. So yes, I'm confident, not arrogant. Just ready. Kale moved back to the table, gathering her datapad and the recording device. You'll remain here under guard while I contact the Assembly. If your documentation threat is real, it's real. Then they'll want to verify before making any decisions. They can verify to their heart's content, Chen said. We're not hiding anymore. That was rather the point of this whole exercise. As Kale left the room, Voss remained with Chen. The guards outside shifted nervously, but he waved them back. Off the record, he said quietly. Was it worth it? 17 years of your species' life, all that effort just to prove a point? Chen considered the question seriously. It wasn't about proving a point, Commander. It was about proving we were worth listening to. Your Assembly looked at humanity and saw potential danger. We needed to show you something more. Potential partner. Yes, we can circumvent your security. Yes, we can operate undetected in your space. But instead of doing that in secret, instead of building up weapons and hiding our capabilities, we came to you openly. We knocked on the door instead of picking the lock. You did pick the lock, Voss pointed out. You're just admitting it after the fact. Fair point. Chen laughed, and it was a surprisingly genuine sound. But we're admitting it and asking for a proper invitation instead of just walking in. That counts for something, doesn't it? I suppose it does. Voss looked down at the meridian again. How many people know? About the barrier breach, the ships out there, all of it? On our side? Maybe 2,000 directly involved in the project. Another 10,000 with partial knowledge. On your side? Chen shrugged. As of 6 hours ago, just me out here. By now, probably several hundred in your intelligence services, piecing together anomalies they couldn't explain before. By tomorrow, thousands. By next week, everyone. And you're ready for that? Commander Voss, we've been ready for this day since year 3. Everything since then has just been refining the approach. She turned to face him fully. Your people meant well with the quarantine. I genuinely believe that, but you can't protect someone by locking them away forever. Eventually, they grow up. They learn. They break down the door. The only question is whether they do it in anger or in hope. We chose hope, and if the Assembly still says no, Chen's expression grew somber. Then we'll be disappointed. But we won't be stopped. We'll keep doing what we've been doing, existing in the spaces between your sensors, learning, growing, preparing for the day when refusing to acknowledge us becomes more costly than accepting us. It might take another 17 years. It might take 50. But it will happen, because we're not going to stop existing just because it's inconvenient for galactic politics. Before Voss could respond, his communicator chimed. Kale's voice came through, tight with tension. Commander, please escort Captain Chen to Conference Room 1. The Assembly has agreed to an emergency session. They want to speak with her directly. Chen raised an eyebrow. That was faster than expected. I imagine, Voss said dryly, that your 5-year-old access to their encryption protocols made them rather motivated. Shall we? They walked through the station's corridors, 4 guards maintaining a careful distance. Crew members stopped and stared as they passed. Word had clearly spread. Voss noted the expressions, shock, fear, curiosity, and on a few faces something that might have been grudging admiration. At the conference room door, Chen paused. Commander Voss, thank you for treating this professionally. I know it can't be easy realizing your security failed. The security didn't fail, Voss corrected her. It just encountered someone more patient than it was designed to handle. There's a difference, is there? I hope so. Because if humanity can spare 17 years to solve a problem peacefully, that suggests you've learned the kind of patience that makes for good neighbors. He opened the door. Don't make me regret that optimism, Captain. I'll do my best, Chen promised, and stepped into the conference room where a dozen holographic assembly representatives waited, their expressions ranging from outraged to terrified to, on one face, genuinely curious. Voss returned to the observation deck, where Kale stood watching the stars. They're out there right now, the representative said softly. 17 ships we can't see. Humans watching us watching them. How did we miss this? We didn't miss it, Voss replied. We just didn't understand what silence meant. We thought it meant submission. It meant preparation. Below them in the docking bay, the Meridian sat quiet and still. But Voss knew, as Kale knew, as the entire assembly was about to learn, that stillness wasn't the same as harmlessness. Humanity had been silent for 17 years. Now they were talking, and the galaxy would never be quite the same.